that precludes you from having to answer these questions about this stuff he appears to be right in the middle of? Joining us now is Jeremy Bash. He served as Chief of Staff to the CIA Director. He also served as Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense. Mr. Bash, thank you very much for being here. It's nice to have you on the show, being so late at night in particular.
Good evening, Rachel.
So, the Times is reporting that the CIA Director, Mike Pompeo, was briefing Mike Flynn along with the President, even though the CIA officers had reviewed those transcripts. They were in on this granular information about Flynn that had led to these serious concerns about Flynn. Just top line, what's your initial reaction to this news?
A couple things, Rachel. First of all, they aren't CIA secrets being briefed to the President. They are intelligence community secrets. They include information from all of the agencies, not just CIA, but also from NSA, also from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. It's really the job of the Director of National Intelligence and the briefer there in the President's daily brief to provide this information for the President. Now, Mike Pompeo, the CIA Director, was attending several of those early briefings. I don't know that we know that it was daily, but it was often. So I think we just need to be careful. It's not like he walks in and tells the President, here are all the CIA secrets. It's a little bit more nuanced. I think your overall point is sound, though, Rachel, which is that if he and the career professionals at the CIA's Counterintelligence Center, in conjunction with their conversations with the FBI, had concerns about the trustworthiness of Mike Flynn, somebody in the room, they would have talked to the President about it. And in the ordinary course, the CIA Director or somebody else would have gone to the President and said, we've got this issue about Mike Flynn. Now, it turns out that as of January 26, we know the President was informed by the White House counsel, Don McGahn, because Sally Yates had gone to him. And so it was really, in my view, a dereliction of duty of the President to allow Mike Flynn not just to be in those intelligence briefings, but to be involved in any national security conversation if the United States government thought he could be blackmailed, primarily during those 18 days.
On the point of Pompeo's responsibility, and I've become increasingly interested in his role in these various investigations, his sort of refusal to answer questions about these investigations, because he does pop up in the middle of these things, the object of such intense focus right now. What the Times is reporting is that CIA officers had reviewed the actual transcripts of the conversations between Mike Flynn and Russian government officials, that they were in on basically the information that led the Justice Department to give this dramatic warning to the White House. If that's true, if that is accurate, and there were people at the CIA who were in on that information, if there are career officials at the CIA who shared those concerns, is it possible that Mike Pompeo was insulated from that, and as director, he just didn't know that at the CIA?
Unlikely. I think what's more likely is that he was briefed about it, and what we don't know, I think the missing piece of the puzzle, is whether he or anybody else in the intelligence community went to the President and said, there's a problem with your national security advisor. That, I think, would be very interesting and important to learn. That's something that either Mike Pompeo could have brought forward, or perhaps Admiral Rogers, the head of the NSA, could have brought forward, because, of course, any transcripts of conversations, if they were signals intelligence, for example, would have also been provided to the National Security Agency. So I think these are important questions. I want to return, though, for a moment, Rachel, to your earlier point about this conversation in the Oval Office where Dan Coats, the Director of National Intelligence, and CIA Director Pompeo were asked, apparently, by the President to intervene in the FBI investigation. That's not really something the CIA Director would do or have any authority to do. He may have been a witness to that conversation, but I think Bob Mueller would be first and foremost interested in talking to Dan Coats, because Dan Coats does have authority over the FBI and counterintelligence matters, and he could have, if he chose to, exercised some tactics to try to shut down the investigation. And we don't know yet whether or not he did any of those things, because he hasn't answered those questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee.
And briefly, Jeremy, if Director Pompeo was a witness to that request by the President to Dan Coats, is there anything about him being CIA Director that would preclude him from being able to answer questions as a witness?
No, and I suspect he will get asked about that eventually.
Jeremy Bash, former Chief of Staff to CIA Director, former Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, somebody very experienced in these matters. Jeremy, thank you for being with us.